Hi, Raessa. Thank you so much for joining me on the Foghorn Podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
And what would you like to share with us today?
Right. So I hope this is, this might sound a bit all over the place, but I guess it also just encouraged me to do some reflecting on my own teenage years.
Sure.
So, a bit about me. I am originally from South Africa, and then I ended up leaving at a young age when I was 7 to the Netherlands and then Singapore. And so coming from South Africa, it was very much like a collectivist kind of society, much tighter culture, I would say. And I think when I then moved to these new environments, later on in life as well, I think it just became, there were a lot of competing demands in terms of identity and what was expected of me, both from, I would say, like a familial or home side, and then also a peer side as well. And for me specifically, I think, formative years, there's a lot of pressure on finding out who you are and finding out what it is that's important to you, or what your values are and things like that. And I think for a large part of that, I really felt like I was attentive to everybody but myself. And so this is kind of linked to what I wanted to share today, which was just about this really strange habit that I guess I developed throughout my teen years, which was really related to imposter syndrome and worry. And I think it came from, a variety of different factors. Like I said, from the community I grew up in, and just kind of having, like a lower sense of self-efficacy. And also South Africa is quite a dangerous place to grow up in as well. So you're quite exposed to, I guess, all of these negative incidents that happen from a young age. So just learning to cope with that was probably something.
What kind of instances do you mean? Like violence?
Oh, yeah. So South Africa is quite it has one of the highest crime rates in the world. And so, I think I came from a pretty average middle income neighborhood in South Africa. So it wasn't, of course, there were always other challenges happening to other neighborhoods around us. But I think I was just probably very sensitive to this kind of information, and then coupled with that kind of environment might have exacerbated it. And so I think overall, that just probably played into, I guess, sensitivities or awareness, which can be great, but when not contained can really wreak havoc.
Sure. No, it's totally understandable. How did it affect you then, all of this?
I think in terms of later on in my teen years, I would say probably just having like a low sense of self-trust, I guess, believing in your ability to do things for yourself, or really having like such a, kind of strong mistrust of other people or the world around you, I guess. It can be quite uncomfortable, I guess. But I think it also, just relating to what I was saying before about the third culture stuff, and also just growing up with different identities, it can feel quite inauthentic at times, because you're just, I think for me, authenticity, or at least being aligned with having my values and then behaving that way, is something that's very important to me. But I guess I just sort of felt like I was an observer for a lot of those years. Yeah.
Can you describe some of the feelings that you had?
I think I felt, I think a lot of people feel this way, that, nobody's going to understand, or that you are unique in your experience, which you are very unique in your experience, and that should be respected. But there's also more of a common kind of humanity, I guess, between what everybody else experiences in life too. And I think for me, it came from wanting to just make everybody else pretty happy, I guess, or just being really attentive to what they wanted. But then also me just being a really hypersensitive observer of where I was and how I was positioned, and also looking for other role models who seemed to be like me and had the same trajectory as me, just to know that whatever I was trying to do was possible. things like that. I think it was a very confusing time, but definitely I would say that there were certain experiences in my teen years that I think positioned me very well right now with my interest in personal development and psychology and emotional intelligence.
Wow, that's it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So how did you get out of this situation or phase in your life? Like, how did you, was there a turning point, or did something happen, or was it a number of things?
I mean, I think it really was a number of things. I think one thing that was really important to me was allowing adult voices into my experience, not from a condescending way. I think, teens often, I mean, young adults as well, your experience is valuable and your insight is,
Sure.
needed.
Definitely.
But I think, yeah. But I think having an adult voice in that mix, it's kind of like when, I had the same worry habit when I was a child, with irrational worries, and you really feel so strongly that what you're thinking is the truth. But when you allow somebody else in with a little more experience, I guess, there is some challenge then to those statements of this is how it's always going to be, or it's never going to change, or
sure.
things
and,
like that.
And how did you, so you listened to somebody more experienced, so you had to trust them, but then you were having problems with your trust. How did you deal with that? That must have been quite difficult. Or?
Definitely. I think in the beginning for me, so I was really lucky in the sense that I got to take, so I was enrolled in the IB program in high school. And so one of the subject offerings they had was psychology.
Oh, wow.
So absolutely. I would definitely say that being able to take psychology at such an in-depth level for 2 years when I was 15, 16, was absolutely transformative in my ability to deal with all of that's I think why I get so excited when I hear you talking about the programs that you do, or other coaches here. It's I still remember some of those lessons as being some of the most, that was my first, probably the introduction that I had to what are your thoughts, how do you manage them. And then it was also just so interesting to, I guess, learn about mental health disorders in general, how culture can influence your emotional health, things like that. So that was like the transition point that I guess prompted me into a bit more of this. And then, a lot of it was talking to other adults, or like maybe one or two. I wouldn't say I spoke to a lot of adults about it. And then change as well, because after graduating, things inevitably do change. Your friends might go to different countries. You might go to somewhere else to study as well, to pursue whatever it is that you want to pursue. And so inevitably, I guess, your environment ends up changing. And for some people, that can be like a really nice breath of fresh air.
But it's amazing that, I guess, the first step, so educating yourself, that's actually, I wasn't expecting you to say that, but actually, that really makes sense, actually, because once you start to begin to understand that you're not the only one who's had these feelings, I guess.
Exactly.
Once you feel alone, that stops you from feeling alone. Being educated.
Definitely.
No, that's really good. So what would you have liked your teachers or parents to have known, or maybe have done at that time? Was there anything they could have done or said, or?
I remember once when I think I was still pretty young, and I was, probably finding it really overwhelming to deal with everything on my own. And I didn't want to worry my parents at all. So I actually didn't share much of this with them. And so I think that's probably where I keep giving the advice of allowing someone else's voice to come in. And I walked into our school counselor's office, actually, but she wasn't there. And so I ended up leaving before she ever came. But my 14-year-old reasoning kind of was, oh, if I went to see her, she would probably tell my mom, who also worked in the same school, that I went to see her. And I think I didn't understand the concepts of privacy or confidentiality at that time. And, there's always this, I only really understood it later on when I grew up and when I went a bit more to university, that this is how it works. And, this is, I mean, myself as a peer counselor, when I was working with students at university as well, that's like one of the first things that you share, that, you know, whatever you say will stay here. And it's only if you're really at harm to yourself or other people, then it would be shared. But I think having a bit more of those technicalities explained to me would have been so useful, because we're always encouraging teenagers and young adults or just younger children to reach out for help. But I think that that's a really important detail that got lost when I was younger, that I wish I would have known, because I might have went back.
That's such an important detail, actually, isn't it? Because that could stop a lot of people opening up, because like you said, fear of, maybe they don't want their parents to know, they don't want to worry them, or so many things. Yeah, no, that's a really good point to mention. And how are you different now then? Like, what do you do differently in your life now compared to those years? Like, I guess it sounds like you're more open.
Yeah, I think definitely that was something that always has helped me throughout, which was, one, having a really stable, I guess, friend group. So I mean, never really, even as a teenager, I always felt so grateful for the friends that I had. I mean, it wasn't a huge group of friends, but I had a few friends that I think are still some of my closest friends today. And really all you need is like one trusted person to be able to share things with, that can have that positive effect. And so for me, it was also, I think really as I went to university, I started speaking to people who were older than me as well. My brother was also someone who was pretty influential in my life, just because I think that was probably one of the voices that I did let in at a pretty early age, you know, to be able to challenge some of the thoughts that I was having. So really to develop, I guess, this a support network of people who genuinely care about you and who really know you. I think that can be quite useful. And even now, I mean, I still find myself turning towards, you know, a trusted professor or somebody who is a mentor to me to ask about their advice, or sharing things. I think just really lessens the burden of your emotional worries.
Because it becomes so big as well. If you just think about something for such a long time, it just becomes so big, and it can just completely take over your whole world.
It can really do that. And then I think the second thing that I would say is also the psychoeducation that I had before, when I was you know, going through my psychology courses and stuff, even in high school. I think you really learn a lot about emotional discipline, which is something that is very interesting to me. I think that sounds like quite a strict concept or something but when you think about it, really, it's all about identifying or being really aware of your triggers, of your thoughts, of like you were explaining before, the whole concept of self-awareness, just understanding how to manage it. How do you set boundaries? How do you react when other people set boundaries with you? These sorts of details. I think that forms the basis of emotional discipline, of understanding, how you go about your day to day. And so for me, that was probably a large part of helping me combat this like worry habit growing up.
And this question is kind of similar, but so what message or advice for young people or teens going through similar situations would you give them now?
I mean, that's a great question, because I often think about what would have helped me. Something that I think I mean, that's useful for me even now, I think it could be useful always actually, is that my friends and I always used to talk about this during, you know, tough times, where when you have those statements that are quite extreme, like this is how it's always going to be for me, or this is how I will always feel, it's really important to remember that your evidence box isn't filled, like it's not finished yet, it's not complete. And that's something that I have to remind myself now too, because I think growing up, when you have those kinds of statements, you've only had a certain amount of experience. And so you're relying on the experience that you have that might be informing those statements now, but you really need to remember that you have a whole life ahead of you to get new positive evidence into your toolbox that you can then refer to later on, that will reshape those statements and reshape the way that you that you think about how your life is going to go. So even now, sometimes I have to remind myself, I mean, I think anybody can remind themselves, to be honest, that, you know, your evidence toolbox, it's not yet full.
Wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. Yeah. And I know you work with, you're with a group, aren't you, yourself? Do you, like, if a teen was going through something, could you offer anything as well?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do again?
Yeah. So right now, so the team that I work with, Mindtales, is really trying to leverage digital interventions in the region for wellness support. And so I think that, I mean, this would offer probably a great opportunity to others who want to learn more about psychology. So something we're developing is digital therapy courses that will then be available for downloading from the App Store. They're very interactive. They're quite personalized as well. So they're tailored very much to your own experience, your thoughts. And our very first one is on cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's
really
CBT,
good.
which is the very first step to understanding your thoughts.
And how could they contact you if anybody was interested? Like?
So definitely feel free to follow the Instagram page of Mindtales. So our handle is @MindtalesOfficial. But also I'm more than happy to be reached out to on LinkedIn as well. Just my name, Raeesa Omar.
Brilliant. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we finish?
Probably just to thank you. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for your time and for all of the work that you do as well.
No, thank you so much, Raessa. And I'm sure even if we help one teen out there who's feeling lonely and lost, it's been great. And I think you've said some really valuable things. So thank you so much. I look forward to working with you soon.
Yes, have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.